My name is Emily Carter. I am 34 years old. And what I am about to share still makes my hands tremble when I think about it. I never thought I would be the kind of woman who discovered betrayal not in the arms of another person, but in the cold lines of a property deed. My husband, the man I believed was my partner, the man I shared a home and dreams with, secretly put our house, the house we had struggled, fought, and sacrificed for, into his mother's name. And he did it behind my back. When I married Daniel 10 years ago, I was convinced we were unstoppable. We were young, ambitious, and determined to build a life from nothing. We worked long hours. I as a nurse and he as a contractor, both of us carrying lunches from home, skipping vacations, and driving the same old cars until they rattled like tin cans. Every penny we saved was a brick in the dream we kept repeating to each other. Our own house, our place, where no landlord could push us out. I still remember the day we found it. A modest 2-story brick house with a tired porch but strong bones, sitting on a quiet street lined with oaks. The price was steep for us, over $200,000, but we convinced ourselves it was worth every sacrifice. We pooled our savings, borrowed from my small inheritance, and signed the papers. That day I felt like I had stepped into adulthood fully, carrying the pride of someone who had made a permanent mark on the world. The years that followed were filled with sweat and stubborn hope. I painted walls with my own hands, patched the garden, and sometimes even worked double shifts to help cover the mortgage. Daniel would bring home scraps of wood and tools from his projects to repair our house. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours, or so I thought. Looking back, the signs were there. Daniel had always been attached to his mother in ways that sometimes made me uncomfortable. She had a habit of inserting herself into our lives, from how we decorated to how much money we spent. She never liked me, though she pretended well enough in front of Daniel. Behind closed doors, she often let her disdain show snide remarks about how I wasn't family-minded enough, or how a nurse's salary was decent pocket change but not real money. I brushed it off because I loved Daniel, and I believed his loyalty was with me. Then came the day everything unraveled. I had gone to the county office to file a small permit request. We were planning to build a shed in the backyard. The clerk asked me whose name to list as the property owner. Ours, I said casually, giving both Daniel's and mine. But the clerk's frown and the pause that followed felt like the world cracking open. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "this property is listed under Margaret Carter. That's not you, is it?" My stomach dropped. I thought at first there was a clerical mistake, but when I saw the official deed with my mother-in-law's name typed neatly where ours should have been, I felt like someone had kicked the air out of me. My signature, my sacrifices, my dreams, none of it was there. It was as if I had been erased from my own life. That evening, I confronted Daniel. My voice shook, but not from fear, from rage. I demanded to know why our house, the house we had bled for, was in his mother's name. He tried to brush it off at first, saying it was just paperwork, that his mother was better with finances, and that it was to protect us in case something happened. His excuses piled up like rotten wood, flimsy and full of holes. I pressed harder, and finally, the truth spilled out. He had transferred the deed into her name shortly after we purchased the house. He claimed it was to secure her help, since she had lent him money years ago that he had never told me about. He had hidden it from me all this time. He had smiled at me across dinner tables, kissed me goodnight, and acted like nothing was wrong, while I paid bills, scrubbed floors, and believed the home we built was ours. The betrayal wasn't just in the papers, it was in every lie, every omission, every time he let me carry the weight of a dream I thought we shared. That night, I didn't sleep. I walked through every room of the house, my hands brushing against the walls I had painted, the kitchen tiles I had chosen, the garden I had nurtured. It all looked different now. It wasn't my home anymore, it was hers, his mother's, because my husband had given it away behind my back. I wish I could say I broke down crying, but I didn't. Instead, something inside me hardened. I felt the weight of years of sacrifice, and I knew I could not let it end like this. If he thought he could erase me from my own life, he was wrong. If he thought his mother could take the house I had poured my soul into, he was wrong. That was the night I made a silent promise. I would take back what was mine. Not out of spite, not out of revenge, but out of survival. Out of the desperate need to prove to myself that I was not disposable, not invisible, not weak. What followed was the hardest, most painful journey of my life, filled with battles I never imagined I would fight with him, with his mother, even with myself. But I can say this: betrayal may break your heart, but it can also forge your spine into steel. And this was only the beginning. The morning after my discovery, I woke up with swollen eyes and a pounding heart. I sat at the edge of the bed, staring at the man I had once believed I would grow old with. Daniel slept soundly beside me, breathing evenly, as if nothing had changed. I wondered how many nights he had lain there, knowing what he had done, while I dreamed about a future he had already stolen. I couldn't bear the silence, so I left early for work. At the hospital, I went through the motions, checking charts, taking vitals, smiling at patients, but inside, I was boiling. Every beep of the monitors, every sterile smell of disinfectant, reminded me that I had given my life to hard work. And for what? For a house I didn't even own? For a marriage built on secrets? That evening, I came home determined to get answers. Daniel was in the kitchen, eating like it was just another day. I sat down across from him and said, "We're not pretending anymore. You're going to explain everything." At first, he played dumb. He shrugged, he muttered, he acted like I was exaggerating. But when I showed him the copy of the deed I had printed, his face hardened. He stopped denying it. Instead, he got defensive. "You don't understand," he snapped, slamming his fork down. "My mother helped us when we didn't have anything. She deserved security. She deserved something back." "Something back?" I repeated, my voice trembling. "You gave her our home, Daniel. You didn't even tell me. Do you have any idea how humiliating it was to find out from a clerk, a stranger, that I don't own the house I've been paying for?" His expression was cold. "Don't act like you're the only one who's sacrificed. I've been working just as hard. And she's family. She'll never take it from us." But that was the problem, wasn't it? It wasn't ours anymore. It was hers. And the way his mother had always looked at me like I was an outsider, like I wasn't good enough, made me realize that this had never been just about money. It was about control. That weekend, my suspicions were confirmed. Margaret, my mother-in-law, dropped by unexpectedly. She walked through the front door like she owned the place, and technically, she did. She ran her fingers along the furniture, glanced at the kitchen like she was inspecting it, and then smiled at me with that smug curve of her lips. "You've kept the place nice, Emily," she said, her tone dripping with fake sweetness. "I always knew Daniel made the right choice putting this under my name. It keeps the family safe." I wanted to scream, but I stayed calm. Safe from what? From me? Her smile didn't falter. From mistakes. From outsiders who don't always understand family decisions. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about a house. This was about erasing me. She wanted to make sure that no matter what happened between Daniel and me, she would hold the power, and Daniel had handed it to her on a silver platter. The weeks that followed were unbearable. I couldn't look at Daniel without feeling like a stranger was in my home. We argued constantly, sometimes in whispers, sometimes in shouts. He insisted it was just paperwork, but I knew better. Paperwork was power. Paperwork meant that if I left tomorrow, I would walk away with nothing but my clothes. I started quietly gathering information. I talked to a lawyer at the hospital, a woman I trusted who had been through her own bitter divorce. She told me something that stuck with me. Don't think of it as just a house. Think of it as your life's work. If you let them take this, you'll never stop resenting yourself. So I began keeping records. Every bill I had paid, every improvement I had funded, every paycheck that had gone toward the mortgage. I built a folder, thick with proof that I wasn't just a bystander in this house, I was a builder, a partner, a rightful owner. Meanwhile, Daniel grew more distant. He spent more evenings at his mother's house, claiming he was helping her with errands. When he came home, he barely spoke to me. Some nights I lay awake listening to the sound of his keys dropping on the counter, wondering if he regretted marrying me at all. Then one evening, I overheard them. Daniel had left his phone on the table, and Margaret called. Her voice carried through the speaker. "You need to make sure she doesn't get any ideas, Daniel. That house is ours. She can't touch it." Ours. Not his, not mine, hers. I felt the blood drain from my face. And when Daniel replied, "Don't worry, Mom, she won't do anything," I realized he didn't see me as his equal anymore. He saw me as an obstacle. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't even argue. I just sat there, staring at the walls I had painted with my own hands. I knew then that the woman who had scrubbed floors, planted flowers, and poured her soul into making this place a home was gone. In her place was someone who had to fight for dignity, for justice, for the life she had built. I didn't know exactly how yet, but I made myself another promise. I would not let them win. I would take back what was mine, even if it meant tearing apart everything else. And that was the moment the war truly began. The war, as I had come to call it in my mind, didn't begin with shouting matches or smashed plates. It began with silence. The kind of silence that stretches through the halls of a home like a ghost. Daniel and I barely spoke except for clipped sentences about bills or groceries. Every time he left to visit Margaret, he didn't even bother making excuses anymore. And every time he returned, the scent of her lavender perfume seemed to cling to his clothes, as if she had branded him as hers. Inside, I was unraveling. I still went to work every day, still smiled at my patients, still charted vitals as if nothing was wrong. But when I came home, I felt like an intruder in my own house. I started spending more time in the spare bedroom, pretending I was working late on paperwork. Really, I was plotting, collecting evidence, learning everything I could about property law. One evening, I met with a lawyer, this time officially. Her name was Rachel, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who wasted no time on pleasantries. I laid everything on the table: the hidden transfer, the years of mortgage payments, Margaret's smug visits. She listened carefully, tapping her pen against her notepad. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. "Emily, you have more power here than you think," she said. "The deed may be in your mother-in-law's name, but if you can prove financial contribution and intent of ownership, a court won't ignore it. It's not going to be easy, but it's possible." Her words lit a fire in me. For the first time, I didn't feel powerless. I felt like I had a weapon. I went home that night with a strange kind of calm. But Daniel noticed. He asked why I was so quiet, and when I told him I had spoken to a lawyer, his face darkened. "You're blowing this out of proportion," he snapped. "You're going to make things worse for yourself." "For myself?" I shot back. "Daniel, you stole from me. You lied to me. You gave away our house like it was nothing. And now you expect me to just sit here and take it?" His jaw tightened. "It's not just your house, it's my family's house. My mother has every right to it." That was when it hit me like a slap. He didn't even see me as part of his family anymore. I was an outsider, someone who had been useful until I wasn't. After that argument, I stopped trying to reason with him. I poured all my energy into building my case. Nights were spent scanning receipts, highlighting transactions, and documenting every ounce of labor I had put into that house. I even took photos of the improvements I had made: the garden beds, the repainted walls, the repaired flooring. I wanted proof that my fingerprints were everywhere, that I had carved myself into the very foundation of the home. But with each passing week, Margaret became bolder. She dropped by more often, walking through the house like it was hers, criticizing my choices. "These curtains don't match the walls," she said one afternoon, shaking her head. "When I move in here permanently, I'll have to redo them." I stood there frozen, my hands gripping the edge of the counter. She was already planning to take my place, already imagining herself living in the home I had built. That night, I confronted Daniel again. "Is that her plan? To move in here? To take everything I've worked for?" He didn't even deny it. "She's getting older, Emily. She needs someone to take care of her. This house will be hers one day anyway." The rage that boiled inside me was almost unbearable. This house was never meant to be hers. It was supposed to be ours. "You promised me, Daniel. You stood beside me when we signed the papers. Do you even remember that day?" He looked away, and that silence told me everything I needed to know. He remembered. He just didn't care. In the weeks that followed, things escalated. Margaret started leaving little hints brochures for redecorating, lists of changes she planned to make. Once, I found her standing in my kitchen with a tape measure, taking notes. Just planning ahead, she said, with a smile that made my skin crawl. I called Rachel in a panic that night. She's going to take everything, I whispered, pacing the living room. Rachel was calm. Let her think she's winning. The more she acts like the owner, the easier it will be to show her intentions in court. Keep documenting. Keep collecting. Trust me, Emily, this isn't over. But it wasn't just legal battles I was fighting, it was emotional ones. The weight of betrayal sat on my chest like a stone. Some nights, I cried quietly into my pillow, terrified of a future where I had nothing. Other nights, I stared at the ceiling, imagining what it would feel like to walk away from it all, to leave Daniel and his mother to their own twisted bond. And yet, I couldn't. Not yet. Because leaving would mean surrendering. Leaving would mean admitting that everything I had sacrificed was for nothing. Then, one night, I overheard something that nearly broke me but also gave me clarity. Daniel and Margaret were in the living room, speaking in hushed tones. I crept down the hallway and listened. "She's getting suspicious," Margaret said. "You need to push her out before she causes trouble." Daniel sighed. "I'm working on it, Mom. She's not going to let go easily." "Then make her," Margaret hissed. "That house belongs to us. She doesn't deserve it." I stood there in the dark, my heart pounding, my hands shaking. They weren't just keeping secrets, they were plotting against me. Together. That was the moment I knew there was no saving my marriage. The man I had loved was gone, replaced by someone who would betray me for his mother's approval. And if I didn't fight back now, I would lose everything. So I made my decision. I wasn't just going to defend myself, I was going to take back my house, piece by piece, brick by brick, if I had to. And this time, I wasn't going to do it quietly. The decision to fight openly felt like stepping off a cliff without knowing if the ground was there to catch me. But I had reached the point where fear was smaller than anger, where humiliation had sharpened into resolve. If Daniel and Margaret thought they could strip me of everything, they were about to see just how wrong they were. The next morning, I scheduled an official consultation with Rachel at her office downtown. I carried with me a thick folder, the one I had been building in secret for weeks, stuffed with receipts, photographs, contracts, and pay stubs. As I slid it across her desk, my hands trembled, but my voice was steady. "This is everything. Every dime I've put into that house. Every piece of proof that I didn't just live there, I built it." Rachel leafed through the folder, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the documents. "This is good, Emily. Very good. Judges love paper trails, and you've got one that shows clear, consistent contribution. Now, here's the reality. We're not just going up against your husband. We're going up against his mother, who legally holds the deed. That means she'll fight tooth and nail to keep control. But if we can prove that the transfer was fraudulent, or at least done without your knowledge and consent, we have a strong case." The words fraudulent transfer echoed in my mind like a lifeline. For the first time since discovering the betrayal, I could see a path forward. It wouldn't be easy, but at least there was a way. That evening, I told Daniel I was filing. His reaction was immediate and explosive. He slammed his fist against the wall so hard that a picture frame rattled. "You're going to ruin everything!" he shouted. "Everything?" I shot back. "Daniel, you already ruined everything the moment you chose her over me. I'm not going to sit here while you and your mother erase me from my own life." His face twisted with anger I'd never seen before. "You're making a mistake, Emily. She'll destroy you in court. You'll walk away with nothing." "Maybe," I said quietly, holding his gaze. "But at least I'll walk away with my dignity. And I won't stop until the truth comes out." From that moment, the house became a battlefield. Margaret came over almost daily, acting like the queen of a castle. She nitpicked everything I did, made veiled threats, and sometimes even brought neighbors in for visits, parading them through her house like she was already the rightful lady of the estate. One afternoon, I returned from work to find her rearranging my living room furniture. My sofa had been pushed to the opposite wall, and she was giving orders to Daniel about where the television should go. "What the hell is this?" I demanded, dropping my bag on the floor. Margaret looked up with that syrupy smile. "Just making a few improvements. You don't mind, do you, Emily? After all, this house is under my name." Something in me snapped. "Yes, I mind. This isn't your home. You may have your name on the paper, but I've bled for this house. You don't get to walk in here and act like I don't exist." Her smile faltered for the first time, and for a fleeting second, I saw the venom in her eyes. "You've always been ungrateful. I should have known you'd cause trouble." I turned to Daniel. "And you? You're just going to stand there and let her take over? Is this what you wanted all along?" He didn't answer. His silence told me everything. That night, I packed a suitcase and moved into the spare bedroom permanently. I couldn't bear sleeping beside a man who had chosen his mother over his wife. The distance between us grew wider, colder. Every shared meal was a war of glares. Every quiet evening punctured by Margaret's constant interference. The court battle began soon after. Rachel filed the paperwork, and within weeks, I found myself standing in front of a judge, my palms sweaty, my heart hammering. Margaret sat across from me, dressed in her finest suit, her face set in stone. Daniel sat beside her, his hand resting on hers, a united front against me. When it was my turn to speak, my voice cracked at first, but then it grew stronger. I told the judge about the sacrifices, the long hours, the inheritance money I had poured into the down payment. I handed over the folder of documents, each piece of paper a slice of my life. Margaret's lawyer tried to paint me as careless, as someone who had no right to the house because my name wasn't on the deed. But Rachel was relentless. She argued that the transfer had been done in secrecy, without my knowledge, and that my financial contributions proved I was an equal owner in every way that mattered. When Margaret was questioned, her mask slipped. She admitted that Daniel had transferred the deed to her name for family security, but stumbled when asked why I hadn't been informed. "Well," she said, fumbling, "it wasn't really her business." Those words cut me like a knife, but they also strengthened my case. Because in that single sentence, she revealed her contempt, her intention to erase me from the picture entirely. The case was adjourned that day without a verdict, but I walked out of the courtroom feeling stronger than I had in months. For once, I wasn't the one on the defensive. For once, they were the ones scrambling to justify their lies. At home, the tension reached a boiling point. Daniel accused me of humiliating his mother in court. Margaret accused me of being money-hungry. But I didn't back down. I had found my voice, and I wasn't going to lose it again. Every night, I whispered the same words to myself before bed. "This house is mine too. They will not take it from me." And for the first time in a long time, I almost believed it. The weeks leading up to the next court hearing felt like living in a storm that never let up. Every day was a new battle, sometimes quiet and cutting, sometimes loud and unbearable. Daniel and I had stopped being husband and wife in any meaningful sense. We were opponents living under the same roof, circling each other like boxers in the ring. And Margaret? She was the coach in his corner, whispering poison into his ear. I began noticing how Daniel was slipping away from me more and more. He started coming home late, avoiding my questions, spending entire weekends at his mother's house. Once, when I asked him directly if he even wanted to be married anymore, he shrugged and said, "You're the one tearing this family apart, Emily. Not me." That sentence stayed with me, gnawed at me. Somehow I was the villain now. Somehow, in his twisted logic, I was the one destroying us, not the lies, not the secret transfer, not the betrayal. But as much as it hurt, I didn't let myself crumble. Instead, I doubled down on preparation. Rachel and I met often, building a strategy brick by brick. She encouraged me to dig deeper, to look for financial trails that might expose Margaret's influence. And so I went through years of bank statements, combed through old emails, even pulled up tax records. That's when I found it. Buried in a series of transfers from years ago, I noticed something strange. Daniel had been funneling money into an account under Margaret's name long before the house was even purchased. At first, I thought it was repayment for the loan he claimed she gave him. But the amounts were irregular, sometimes small, sometimes large, and they stretched back almost a decade. When I showed the records to Rachel, her eyes narrowed. "This isn't a loan repayment pattern. This looks like asset shielding. He's been moving money into her accounts to hide it." The realization made my stomach turn. Not only had he betrayed me with the house, but he had also been playing financial games behind my back for years. All the times I thought we were broke. All the nights I stayed up worrying about bills, he had money. He just wasn't telling me. At the next hearing, Rachel brought it up. Margaret's lawyer tried to object, but the judge allowed the evidence to be presented. The courtroom felt electric as Rachel laid out the pattern of transfers, showing how Daniel had systematically funneled money to his mother while presenting himself as financially strapped. Margaret's face reddened. Daniel avoided my eyes completely. For once, the power dynamic shifted, their lies were being dragged into the light, and they hated it. But the battle wasn't over. That night, Daniel exploded at me. He cornered me in the kitchen, his voice low but venomous. "How dare you dig into my finances? You've gone too far." I stood my ground. "Too far? Daniel, you've been lying to me for years. You put our house in your mother's name, you hid money from me, and you expect me to just smile and play along? No. You may have thought I was weak, but I'm not. Not anymore." For a moment, I thought he might hit me. His fists clenched, his jaw tightened. But instead, he stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. I stood there shaking. But I also felt strangely triumphant, because I realized something important. His anger wasn't power. It was fear. He knew he was losing control. The following weeks were brutal. Margaret began a smear campaign against me in the neighborhood. I overheard her telling people I was greedy and trying to steal from her family. Some neighbors stopped talking to me. Others gave me sympathetic looks but stayed silent. I felt isolated, trapped in a community where whispers followed me everywhere. But I refused to let her win. I kept showing up to court, kept handing over evidence, kept telling my story. Every time I stood before the judge, I reminded myself, this wasn't just about a house. This was about respect, dignity, and refusing to be erased. Then came the breaking point. During cross-examination, Margaret slipped. She was asked why she hadn't informed me about the transfer, and in her arrogance, she admitted, "Because I didn't trust her with it. She was never really part of this family anyway." The courtroom went silent. Rachel glanced at me with a small smile, because Margaret had just revealed her true motive: control and exclusion. It wasn't about money. It was about pushing me out. I left the courthouse that day feeling lighter than I had in months. For the first time, I could see the cracks in their armor. For the first time, I believed I might actually win. At home, Daniel barely looked at me. He moved through the rooms like a ghost, silent and bitter. And I realized something else. Even if I won the house, I had already lost my marriage. The man I once loved was gone, consumed by his mother's shadow. But strangely, that realization didn't break me. It freed me. Because I wasn't fighting for him anymore. I was fighting for me. For the woman who had worked herself to the bone, who had believed in dreams, who deserved better than betrayal and lies. The next hearing was set to be the final one. And as I prepared, I knew this wasn't just about proving my case in court. It was about proving to myself that I could stand tall, no matter how much they tried to tear me down. The war was reaching its climax, and I was ready. The final hearing loomed like a thundercloud on the horizon. Every day leading up to it, my stomach twisted with a mix of dread and determination. I had gone through months of humiliation, arguments, and sleepless nights, and I knew this was it, the moment everything would either come crashing down on me or finally tip in my favor. The night before court, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the living room with a cup of cold tea, staring at the walls I had painted, the furniture I had picked, the pictures on the mantel that now felt like props in someone else's home. The silence was suffocating, and I found myself whispering to the empty room, "Please, let me have this. Please, don't let them erase me." The next morning, I walked into the courthouse with Rachel by my side. She was calm, collected, as if she had ice in her veins. I tried to borrow some of her strength, to stand tall even as Margaret strutted into the courtroom like royalty. Daniel followed close behind her, his face set in stone, refusing to look at me. They sat together, shoulder to shoulder, like allies preparing for battle. The proceedings began, and it didn't take long for the fireworks to start. Rachel presented our evidence one final time. The years of financial contribution, the inheritance money I had used for the down payment, the bank transfers Daniel had funneled into his mother's account, the improvements I had personally funded. She laid it all out in sharp, precise language that made my sacrifices impossible to ignore. Then it was their turn. Margaret's lawyer painted me as ungrateful, as someone who was trying to take advantage of a generous family matriarch. He waved the deed around like it was holy scripture, insisting that because her name was on it, the house belonged to her. But then came cross-examination. Rachel's voice was calm but cutting. She asked Margaret why she believed the house belonged solely to her when I had been paying the bills for years. Margaret tried to maintain her composure, but arrogance slipped through her words. "Because Daniel and I made the decision as a family," she said firmly. Rachel tilted her head. "And where was Emily in that decision? Isn't she family?" Margaret hesitated. She wasn't involved. It wasn't her place." The words echoed through the courtroom like a gunshot. It wasn't her place. I saw the judge's expression shift. Ever so slightly, Rachel pressed on, asking why the transfer had been kept a secret, why I was never told, why I continued to pay into a mortgage I had no legal ownership of. Margaret stumbled, contradicted herself, and finally snapped. "She was never meant to have this house," she spat. "Daniel deserves it, not her. She's just temporary." Gasps rippled through the room. My heart hammered in my chest, but I kept my face steady. Margaret had finally revealed the truth. It was never about protecting anyone. It was about cutting me out. Then came Daniel's turn on the stand. I wanted to look away, but I forced myself to watch. His voice was quiet at first, rehearsed, but under pressure, he began to crack. He admitted that he had transferred the deed because his mother insisted. He admitted that he hadn't told me because he knew I would make a scene. Rachel leaned forward. "So instead of being honest with your wife, you chose to deceive her for years? You let her pour money, time, and energy into a home she didn't legally own, knowing all along she was being left out?" Daniel shifted uncomfortably. I didn't think it mattered. Didn't think it mattered." The phrase stabbed me deeper than any knife could. The man I had loved, the man I had trusted, didn't think my existence in this marriage mattered. The judge called for a recess. I stepped out into the hallway, my legs weak, my chest tight. Rachel touched my arm gently. "Emily, this is going well. Don't lose faith now. They're showing their hand. The judge can see the truth." I nodded, but my eyes filled with tears. Not because of fear, but because I finally saw clearly. Even if I won the house, I had already lost Daniel completely. The person standing beside his mother in that courtroom wasn't the man I married. He was a stranger who had chosen betrayal over love. When the hearing resumed, Rachel gave her closing statement. She spoke with fire, with conviction, reminding the court that ownership is not just ink on paper, it's blood, sweat, and sacrifice. She described how I had been erased from a dream I had built with my own hands, and how that erasure was not just unfair, but unlawful. Margaret's lawyer sputtered through his closing remarks, but the damage was done. Their arrogance had bled through. Their intentions laid bare. The judge didn't deliver the verdict that day. He said it would take time to review the evidence, that a decision would be mailed in the coming weeks. The waiting would be torture. But as I walked out of the courtroom, I felt lighter. Because no matter the outcome, I had stood up for myself. I had refused to be silenced. At home, the atmosphere was unbearable. Daniel barely spoke. Margaret still dropped by like she owned the place. And every corner of the house felt like it was waiting for the verdict as much as I was. Nights stretched long and restless, every sound magnified, every shadow whispering the same question. Will I lose everything? But even in the fear, there was strength. Because I knew that whatever the judge decided, I had fought for myself. I had refused to let them erase me. And that, in itself, was a victory. The final decision was coming. And with it, the end of everything, one way or another. The envelope arrived on a rainy Thursday morning. I had been checking the mailbox obsessively every day, my heart lurching every time I saw the postman. When I finally held the thick, official envelope in my trembling hands, I stood on the porch for a long time, rain soaking through my sweater, unable to open it. I knew that whatever was inside would decide not only the fate of the house, but the fate of my marriage, my dignity, and my future. I went inside, sat at the kitchen table, the same one where Daniel and I had once shared late-night pizza, whispered plans about children, argued over bills, and tore it open. My eyes scanned the words, my chest tightening with every line. Then I saw it. The court ruled in my favor. The deed transfer was declared invalid, having been done without my knowledge or consent. My financial contributions, my inheritance money, my years of sacrifice, they mattered. The judge ordered that the house be legally placed back into both Daniel's and my names. In that moment, I laughed and cried at the same time, my tears falling onto the pages. But the victory was bittersweet, because as much as I had fought for the house, I realized it was no longer just about bricks and walls. It was about what the fight had revealed. And what it revealed was that my marriage was over. When Daniel came home that evening, I handed him the papers. He read them in silence, his face pale. "So, you won," he muttered bitterly. "No, Daniel," I said softly, my voice steady. "I didn't win. We both lost. Because I wanted this house to be our dream. Instead, it became our battlefield." For the first time, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes, not anger, not arrogance, but regret. But it was too late. Too much had been said. Too much had been done. His silence had been louder than any apology could ever be. Within weeks, I filed for divorce. The house was split as part of the settlement, but Daniel chose to move out. Margaret tried to linger, but without the legal claim, her grip was gone. Watching her pack up her smugness and walk away from the house was almost as satisfying as the verdict itself. The first night alone in the house, I sat in the living room surrounded by silence. For once, it wasn't suffocating. It was peaceful. I looked around at the walls, the furniture, the little imperfections that I had once cursed and now cherished, because they were mine. Truly mine. It wasn't easy rebuilding after the wreckage. There were nights I cried, mornings I woke up with an ache in my chest, wondering how the person I had loved could betray me so deeply. But little by little, I began to heal. I planted flowers in the front yard again, painted the spare room a fresh color, and opened the windows to let the sunlight pour in. I learned something through all of it. A house isn't just a structure, it's a reflection of the life lived inside it. And if that life is built on lies, the house will always feel like it's crumbling. But if it's built on truth, resilience, and self-respect, it can stand stronger than any storm. Today, when I walk through those rooms, I no longer feel erased. I feel seen. I feel present. This home, scarred and imperfect as it is mine, because I fought for it. And in fighting for it, I found myself again. And so, to those of you who've stayed with me through this story, thank you. Thank you for listening, for caring, for walking with me through the shadows. If there's one thing I want you to take from my story, it's this. Never let anyone erase you. Your voice, your sacrifices, your worth, they matter more than you know. And if you've made it this far, please don't forget to subscribe and leave a like. It helps me share more stories like this. Stories that remind us all that even in betrayal, even in heartbreak, there is strength. Because in the end, sometimes the fight to save a house is really the fight to save yourself.